Hi everybody, let's back to find out what happens today in Polaris when they meet the creature again. Chapter 25, Daffy raises the alarms. Henry lay awake for most of the night. He was sure he had heard something moving just below the cabin. The wind had picked up again and he strained to isolate the sound from the gentle hush-hush of the ship rolling through the water and the not-so-gentle snoring of Aaron in the next hammock. There! He heard it again. It was a scratch. A thump. It's both, he decided. It was coming from directly below them. Was it a coincidence, or could it be the creature sensed their presence through the worn old wood? You don't even know if it's a creature, he told himself. Calm down. Be reasonable. But it didn't work. He was sure it was the creature. He could practically see its barbed feet dragging across the wet wood below. How deep is the water between the decks now? And when will the creature tire of its dreary confinement down there? He went back to listening, but only heard the noise once more that night, and he was so sleepy that he wondered if he dreamed it, because the noise had changed. It almost sounded like it was scratching was coming from within the floor, not below it. Finally, he drifted off to sleep. Almost immediately, he was woken up to take his turn at the pumps. He groaned and headed out along with Aaron. The chain pump worked better with 4 people, but the job could be done with 2. Henry's muscles still ached from the day before. His muscles always seem to ache these days. Look on the bright side, he told himself. At least you have muscles now. The moon was low and the sunrise near as he and Aaron padded wordlessly through the gentle rolling deck. Henry had no trouble keeping his balance in conditions like this now, and had even adopted the same loose-hipped, rolling gait that served the others so well. The only thing he still could not do well was climb the rigging to work the sails. The reason for that had less to do with the sea than the sky, though. He had discovered so much embarrassment that he was terrified of heights. He took his position on the pump. Ready, he asked, grasping the handle. No, grumbled Aaron, following it with a big open mouth yawned. Too bad, said Henry. I think this boat is near to sinking. He raised up, preparing to push his side of the handle down, but Aaron didn't lift his handle. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Henry, who peered back at him and didn't dawn light. This boat is near to sinking, and we need to get off the waves, he said in a sleepless replaced with icy seriousness. One more storm and will be the end of us. Henry held his gaze. We will get her off the waves soon enough. We can't be too far from Florida now. There's other land that's closer, said Aaron, and it's not just the waves. Every minute we're on board with that thing is a minute too long. You said it yourself. These barriers, he lifted his chin toward the boarded up forward hatch, can't hold it back. But we haven't heard from it in days, Henry began, but he stopped there, unwilling to lie further to his only friend on the board. He had, after all, heard from the thing just hours before. But every day we don't hear from it, it grows stronger, said Aaron. You said that too. Henry nodded. He had said that, and his thoughts on the matter had shifted dramatically as of late, and not in ways he felt comfortable sharing. He searched his sleepy brain for something he could say. We gave it a good scalding last time, though. It may fear us. Bugs, after all, are quite dumb. Aaron snorted. That thing is no bug. Henry remembered the look in old Maisie's eyes when Owen first pointed the pistol. True again, he thought. All he could think to do now was change the subject. Well, he said, if we don't start pumping soon, we won't have to worry about it. Aaron smirked. You're such a schoolmarm sometimes, he said, bending down to grasp the pump handle. Ready, said Henry. Aaron nodded, and the two got to work. They pumped steadily as the moon set, took a brief break to watch the sunrise, and then got back to it as the sky lightened above them. It would have been beautiful if not for the rancid bilge water splashing about their feet. Henry's top half was soaked with sweat, and his bottom half wet with bilge by the time Thatcher and Maria showed up to relieve them. Henry was desperate for a drink of water, and it washed as they approached eagerly. They seemed to take forever to cross the deck. Maria was limping badly now, and Thatcher was all too happy to slow his pace to match hers. You should change that bandage again when you are done, Henry said to Maria. Hobbled her way inside the pump. She shrugged. I'm not sure I want to see what's underneath, she said. What she needs is a doctor, not fresh rags, said Thatcher. Aaron and Maria nodded empathetically at that. Perhaps you could talk some sense into our little dictator, Thatcher continued. He seems to respect your opinion. He thought about that and then clarified. Not about sailing, of course, but about matters scientific. Henry looked around. He was outnumbered, and it made him feel uncomfortable. Perhaps, he said lamely, and he headed straight for the scuttlebutt to plug his lying mouth with a cup of water. Because he knew he would say nothing to the sort to Owen. He agreed with Owen. They did need to reach the United States. The creature they were carrying with them might be a horrible thing, but Henry realized something else now. It was also a truly amazing discovery. The others had felt despair when they failed to kill it. Henry had felt relief. The creature terrified him, but the thought of its destruction now scared him nearly as much. It was an entirely new form of life, hybrid organism, a fungus capable of metamorphosis, far more intricate than any butterflies. It was the intersection of the 3 different fields of biology. Who knew what scientific advances it might lead to? Henry's mind raced at the possibilities, and Dr. Weatherby had discovered this terrible, marvelous thing. It was his last and greatest contribution to science. It was his legacy. Henry was confident that the proper trained customs officials could be made to understand that. The U.S. government had, after all, provided some of the funds for this research expedition. The creature must not be burned as a monster, but rather studied as a marvel. Perhaps they would even name its new species after Weatherby. What a way to honor his memory! The cooling water spilled down his chin and his face bent into a crooked smile. He cast his eyes around the deck. Owen was talking quietly to Emma near their helm. They both had on their broad black hats and shield against the morning sun. Suddenly, Henry caught a quick movement out of the corner of his left eye and heard a soft rustling. He whipped his head around toward the heavy tarpaulin that had been stretched over the nearest grating. He was almost sure he'd seen a flicker of movement there. He stared at it and wiped his hand across his mouth and chin. "What are you looking at?" said Aaron, lifting up the water cup for his turn. Henry flinched and managed to collect himself. "Nothing," he said. "Thought I saw the cover move. The wind, most likely." "Aye," said Aaron. "Guess we're all a little jumpy now." "Guess so," said Henry. But his words were punctured by the soft rustle of the tarp. He turned once again, and this time he did see something. Daffodil was advancing slowly toward the coil of old rope that had been left on the far side of the grating cover. "Oh, it's just Daffy," Henry said to Aaron. Henry watched her move. She was crouched down in the low front with her head over just her paws. Her tail flicked silently back and forth. "Is she hunting something?" "Get that, will you?" said Aaron. "The cat?" "No, the rope. We need to mend the rigging, and someone will trip over it if we leave it there anyhow." "Oh, right," said Henry, hopping over the corner of the grating cover and eyeing the coil of rope. Someone would definitely turn an ankle if they stepped in the dark hollow of its center. He brushed past Daffy and bent down to give her a scratch behind the ear. She avoided him, bending around his hand and continuing to stalk slowly toward the coil. "Hunting rope, are you?" said Henry. He straightened up and continued on toward their mutual objective. Human legs began significantly longer. He got there first. He knelt down, and the coil looked heavy, and he reminded himself of some advice Owen had said. "Lift with your legs, not your back." He wedged his left hand under the outside of the coil and reached it in toward the dark, well in its center with his right. Hiss! Daffy leapt toward the deck and landed atop the coil, hissing madly. Henry was so surprised by the sudden assault that he fell backward, landing on the deck. He looked down and saw 3 red lines in the back of the right hand. "She scratched me," he blurted. As he looked up, he saw Daffy wasn't done scratching yet. She was perched on top of the coil, batting down in the circle hollow at the center with both front paws, like a tiny clawed box. "There must be a rat in there," said Aaron, looming over Henry, and reaching down to help him to his feet. "You're lucky you didn't stick your hand inside." Henry nodded, imagining how much worse his wound would have been if it had been from a rat's teeth. He rose back to his feet and peered inside the coil. He got a glimpse of the horrible truth. He gasped and stepped back. "That's no rat," he breathed. "Not anymore." "Oh, dear Lord," said Aaron, seeing it now, too. Poking out of the coiled rope was the face of the rat, slick with a clear slime, bearing 2 long blackened teeth at the cap just above it. But the head around its face was covered in dark red armor and topped with 2 bobbling antennas. Daffy tagged one of them with her paws, sending it waving wildly back and forth. The rat creature hissed loudly and rose to its full height. Its 2 front legs appeared in the sunlight, and then 2 middle legs. Each of them ended not in claws, but in barbs. Emma appeared at a run. Her sister spear gripped tightly in her right hand. "Daffy, get out of there!" she shouted. The ship's cat paid her no mind, bunching up her hind legs and preparing to pounce down at the thing in the rope. "Adios mio!" Henry heard her breathe, and then in a moment before the cat leapt, Emma did. She landed on the opposite side of the coil from Daffy, and as she did, she drove the spear down hard. The iron spike found a home in the rat creature's back. Henry heard the thick crunch as it penetrated the hard exoskeleton. Daffy made a murr sound and leapt in the other direction, away from the sun and impact. Emma twisted the iron point in deeper, pitting the thing to the wood of the deck. Henry took a few steps forward and peered down inside the coil. He watched the bizarre creature squirm and twitch, and then for a few moments fall still. He stared down at its body, the more insect than rat now, covered with the same slime they'd seen before. Where did it come from? Said Aaron. Henry remembered the rustling tarp just minutes earlier. From below, he said. Suddenly, he saw movement within the coil. A little puff of white dust floated free from the creature's mouth, then another. More white powder drifted up toward the coil in the back. Henry's eyes grew wide in both recognition and fear. Get back! He said when Aaron and Emma continued to stare down at the little carcass. He yelled, Get back! He turned and all but wrestled them the first few steps until they turned again and began moving on their own. Finally, when they were a good 10 feet away, he released them and turned to see which way the wind was blowing. He saw the spear sticking straight up at the center of the coil and saw the white cloud rising from inside. But as soon as the tiny particles cleared the top of the rope, the stiff breeze carried them through the railing and out to sea. Henry released a breath. Then he'd been holding. What was that cloud? Said Emma. Those were spores, he said. Fungal spores. And, what are those? Asked Aaron. It's how they reproduce, he said. Oh, said Emma. You mean? Henry nodded. It's what the rat must have breathed in, before it. And rickets before them, said Owen from just behind them. The others left their task now and headed over to see what the commotion was about. Thatcher moved around the little group, angling for a better look. Don't go near it, said Henry. Not just yet. Are you going to tell us what happened at least, said Thatcher. Henry was saved by a girl, said Aaron. Henry just nodded. He didn't find it embarrassing in the least. And a cat, he nodded. Oh, we'll find out what happens in chapter 26. I believe next. I think it's too long to read with this one. All right, I hope you enjoyed that one. We'll find out if they get caught by the fungal spores or not.